Coming to you from Star Studios in Denton, Texas, and Tom Collins Signs in Limerick, Ireland. This is Coffee with a Sign Painter, a podcast hosted by sign painter Sean Starr and Tom Collins. This groovy soundtrack was written and performed by Fergal Lawler of the Cranberries. Thanks, Fergal.
I'm here with Laura and Dave from Triple Threat Press. Used to be Denton, now in Cleveland, but back in Denton. Hello.
Hello.
So let's start with why are you guys back in Denton?
We came back into town to do the Dime Handmade Harvest. It's a big event every year with local makers who sell their wares.
Yeah, it's all handmade goods, and we started our business there. Like, our first retail goods were sold there, so it's kind of like a thing that we try to make a regular practice of. And they change locations, they change dates. It's generally a really hard thing to redo all that stuff and still get a huge crowd and a bunch of vendors, but they did it. It was wonderful. We're so glad to be back.
Yeah, Kaylee and I went on Saturday and picked up some of your stuff and some other stuff. It's a cool event.
Yeah, they do a good job over at the Dime store.
So this all worked out good because we had interviewed you guys in Cleveland when we were up for Weapons of Mass Creation Fest, and the audio that came from that was not usable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Here we are.
It's good timing, I guess, that we were able to do this again. Yeah, we're happy. We're also it's kind of abstract when you're talking about, a place like Denton, which was a lot of what we talked about previously, but, it's all in your head. It's just a nice refresher. Like, if this stuff comes up, we've got new experiences since we moved away. I don't know. It makes the nostalgia a little bit stronger. Maybe it'll be a more sentimental podcast.
Yeah. No weeping.
Yeah.
No crying.
So, you guys have a design / letterpress studio.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That you guys started here in Denton.
Yeah, we started it in the front bedroom of our house in 2012, and we made holiday cards and things to sell for that holiday season, and weren't really sure where it was going to go after that, and then got a really good response from that and decided to kind of see how far we could take it. And to this point, it has gone from the front bedroom of our house to December 1st, we'll be opening our own letterpress studio in Cleveland. So
congratulations, that's awesome.
Yeah, people can finally come and visit by appointment, or during public events we'll have studio sale type of things going on.
Okay.
And we don't have to illegally hide in our house.
Yeah, that's kind of fun too, though.
Nice to have a bit of
stick it to the man.
Mystery.
Work out your living room. There's something to that.
Yeah.
We've got some rebelliousness about us. Yeah. We'll miss that, I guess.
So how'd you guys get involved with letterpress?
Well, when I came to the University of North Texas in 2009, I was in the graduate program for printmaking, and a couple of years in, the graduate, one of the professors found a letterpress, and it was in town about to be scrapped, so they got it in the studio, and myself, the professor, and several other graduate students who are absolutely some of the most talented people I've ever met, we all put our heads together and we helped restore this. And so from there, not only did I help restore this kind of pretty far gone press, but I learned a lot about kind of jerry-rigging things and understanding just because it's tradition doesn't mean you have to do it exactly that way. You can make new backwoods ways of doing things, and you start to do all these really fun things with machines that are, when you get down to the root of it, all very similar. And we got ourselves a small press right when I graduated to kind of help me continue to make art, and Dave said, why not just try and make some money off of it? So we restored that little press, and now we're 4 presses deep, about to be 5 presses deep, and one of them is almost identical to the very first press that I helped restore. So
awesome.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Very cool. And so your background is?
I call myself a jack of all trades and master of none. My background is in a little bit of everything. I played in bands when I was a teenager. I started doing websites for those bands because nobody else knew how to do it. I took graphic design classes in college. I do photography. So I do a lot lot stuff
you
that
hustle. You hustle.
Yeah, it's a little bit of
Every day
hustling.
he's hustling.
Every day,
Yeah.
every single day.
So
Just call yourself a Renaissance man.
There
That
you
sounds
go.
really cool.
Yeah.
That's what my mom calls me. So yeah, it's just a little bit of everything, but all centers around the, creative realm. So
Yeah, I've often said, like, when people would ask me when I was a kid, like, what do you plan on doing? I'd say, I'm only good at so many things, and they all happen to be in the same field. So I guess I'm lucky at that. And I think Dave is, like, really similar.
But see, that's old school because, prior to social media where people like micro focus on one little thing they're doing, like you had to like do it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to scrub the toilet and figure out the accounts and
Yeah.
figure out how to sell whatever it is you're doing.
I've scrubbed my fair share of toilets as well.
I think that as like business people, that's so true. You end up doing a lot of stuff you don't want to do, and like things that you never picture your talents needing to like come into play to help out with, and like you said, scrubbing the toilets, but balancing the books and painting the clean the windows, whatever it takes. You just got to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's a disconnect right now with seeing a lot more people get into creative fields is not understanding. Like 98% of it's very unglamorous grunt work.
Yeah.
To be able to do the 2% that's fun and exciting.
Yeah, we know exactly what that's all
Yeah.
about.
At the same
we do
time-
a lot of grunt work.
We do, but at the same time, like, there's nowhere that is written down. There's rarely going to be an instance where a young person knows who to talk to find out all of these things. So I think that, like, this social media, wave, the popularity of just being so open with and personal with the people who are following us is so important, because we get to start writing about like what it really is like. Do not be, under the impression that this is going to be a glamorous job. You got to do the nitty-gritty stuff. And if we start being more transparent, like online about that kind of stuff, I feel like the next generations are really going to have a
You
much
got a
better
good point. And
understanding.
I just took a lot of crap from, I posted the Q&A interview that I did in Cleveland on YouTube, and I'm going to be putting it up on the podcast soon. But I got some grief over that because some of the things I said in the Q&A were along those lines.
They're not too pretty.
Yeah. But it's like, that's just reality. I'd rather tell people what at least my experience has been than try to, paint it as something, that's been all warm and fuzzy. It hasn't been, and it still isn't. I mean, we're still doing the same thing everybody else is doing with, oh crap, the money in the account's getting low. Oh crap, the taxes are due, and on and on and on. It's just part of life. And I'd rather be transparent about that than have people think, oh, well, I'm graduating art school in a year and I'm just going to jump in and be a sign painter and I'll make good money. And it's like,
Yeah,
You'll
that
have-
doesn't
Good luck
exist.
with that.
No, you'll have a great time,
yeah.
but it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, and you won't have a retirement plan. And you'll at the very best, you'll be like keeping up with your bills. So,
So
you know.
true. Yeah, you're.
But I know you guys have dealt with a lot of those same issues.
Yeah.
We have, and I think that like we're one of the first generations where a lot of people kind of like crap on our age group. We're considered millennials. And last night we actually had a really wonderful conversation with Dave's old boss, a really good friend of ours, and his wife and his brother and our friend, and they're slightly older than us, and they kept saying like, you guys don't seem like millennials, you don't seem like millennials, and it's because I think that we're the whole idea of being a millennial is like you have two elements of your personality. You know that you gotta hustle, but at first it's you've been really coddled, so like you can't get down on these kids for being kind of in the dark about things because they're ready to do it. They've just never been told any of this like nitty-gritty stuff. So
Yeah, and that's a fair point too. You know, I'm definitely on the other end age-wise, but you know, I think it's difficult to remind yourself, like the way my dad was like people like that don't exist anymore.
Well, they also existed in a world where you could be like that, whereas nowadays I don't know that our world is necessarily set up to be able to handle people who just, I mean, my dad was the same way. He decided that, you know, he started working for his dad and learned how to rebuild transmissions and realized that there was nowhere for him to get all of the parts that he needed from one place. And he was calling all these different companies to get parts to rebuild transmissions. And so he just he bought an enormous warehouse and just started stocking all of these parts. And that, you know, that was his business. And, you know, nowadays, go out and try to find an enormous warehouse where you can, you know, skirt EPA regulations and all this stuff to just have a building where you can tear apart transmissions all day and
Yeah,
you know.
when we were in South Texas doing custom paint, you know, we would paint like in their wash bays at car dealerships, you know, and the fumes were just pouring out, and you know, but that's just how it was.
Yeah.
what do you gotta do? Yeah.
And so it's kind of a different world where, you know, there are still people who can go out and just find out what they want to do and go out and get it done, but it's also can be difficult to do that.
Yeah, no, I get that, and it's, you know, to a certain extent, it's nostalgia for something that doesn't exist anymore.
Totally. You know, we're trying to buy a house, and our banker pretty much was like, you guys are a really unique case because your income is coming from so many different directions, so many different types of businesses. And I thought about it and I was like, how much longer can he expect to get these solid one income or two income kind of families where you don't have the hustler, you know, with 2 or 3 side gigs, or the guy who works in an office Monday through Thursday, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday he does wedding photos.
Yeah, and I've read that that's very much now the norm.
Yeah, and it's problematic.
Yeah, you know, it's
Bank-wise.
yeah, but I mean, it's normal now that people have multiple things they're dabbling in to try and get enough money in the door. I mean, we do too. We've got little sidelines with apparel and other things that, you know, just trying to make ends meet.
And I think our systems, like in general, you know, banking and just even like societal systems of understanding how people work now, they're just got to catch up.
Yeah, possibly.
I
Either that or we're all tanking.
Yeah.
We just wake up post-apocalyptic, smoke everywhere.
I forget where I read it, but basically somebody somewhere at one point recently wrote that the economy has failed creative people so poorly, so it's become so bad, that we basically have had to create our own economy where we are making our own things and selling them to other creative people. And so we basically have just invented this microeconomy for makers, but it doesn't work well with the outside world.
Yeah, we see that even with our business. With what we do, we still get peppered in, you know, big restaurants and these kind of things, and those are just kind of take the money and run kind of jobs. But the really creative work that you enjoy doing is usually for other creatives, and they're usually poor, so you're like doing it cheap, but that's okay. I mean, it
Perpetuates.
you know, it pushes everything forward for everybody, and I think that's good.
I think that was like Sean. For everybody out there in podcast land, John was our very first custom job we printed, which was amazing to be able to work with someone so talented and so eager to work with us, like right out of the dock, because usually you get a bride who is just awful as your first job. But
You mean
Sean,
I wasn't a
you were not an
bridezilla?
awful bridezilla, thank God. But you taught us a really awesome lesson, and it's totally rung true. The lesson of when you work with the small guys, do what you can to make everybody happy, and when it comes down to the big guys,
Or bridezillas.
you just got to ask for what it's worth to put up with this pressure.
Totally. We got a baptism by fire with that, with some work we did for the Gap with those taco trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The demands were insane. And so, even before we had entered into a contract, the demands were so crazy. I was like, I'm just going to ask for the money I need for this. 'Cause, but, it's kind of going through this transition with that too. And I think you guys probably have gotten a taste of this, of the corporate world, I think, saw what was going on in the maker community, and it's like, well, we need to tap into that because people connect with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking back now and seeing that we were used in quite a few instances by some of these big companies, and we used them back. I'm not going to complain.
Right.
We charged them well for it, but it's just interesting.
There's also the flip side of that, where larger companies are looking at places like Etsy and small handmade markets, and just lifting those ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And printing them and doing them themselves, and then figuring that, it's just a small maker.
Sue me?
Yeah.
It's a total Donald Trump mentality.
Yeah, I don't remember the girl's name, but she designs all these cool little things with the pins.
Yes.
Yeah, and some big retailer totally stole all of it.
Yeah.
And then they're like,
yeah, whatever.
Take me to court.
It happens far more frequently than you imagine, and it's just we're lucky enough that I think that handmade is a large enough market where it's touching enough people in enough places that you do get people who will let you know about this stuff. But I know people who have walked into Target, not known anything, and seen almost a direct copy of their T-shirt design on a mannequin with absolutely no notice and no hints as to that potentially happening to them. So as the handmade community grows, yes, that is more increasingly a problem, but people look out for us. People like us. People don't like Target.
Yeah, well, that's the key is, you got mega corporate crap out there, doing this kind of stuff, but the cat's already out of the bag. People have figured out what they're doing and how they're manipulating people, and they're disconnecting and they're panicking.
And the scary thing is, we just recently had a wholesale order from a very large Cleveland-based company who has a storefront in the first floor of their headquarters. And they ordered from us, and it's sad, but my first thought was, why are they ordering this from us?
Mm-hmm.
And are they just going to take this product and reverse engineer it and make their own?
Well, ultimately.
And then I had to try to figure out, what do I do to protect myself from that? And it was so costly that I just gave up and was like, well, I'm just going to send it and hope for the best.
And it worked out really nicely.
Worked out well. But
thank God. Thank you so much.
but you have to view it that way, and it's really stinks, but you do, because there is that mentality out there of just slash and burn, and then they know that some little independent company working out of a basement or a house or whatever, what are you going to do? You're going to drop $20,000 on some lawyer, and in the end you probably just have to pay him. Nothing will get solved anyway. So it's just, I think it's, to a certain extent, you just got to rise above it. Just be like, you stink. Karma will get you.
Yeah, for sure.
So you are, as I am, a old class car fanatic.
Yes.
And you have a car that you drive around.
I do.
I envy.
I have a 57 Chevy Bel Air. It is from the factory. Most 57 Chevy Bel Airs were two-tone. So you had white and with a red top or something like that. This car from the factory was black on black with red interior. And it came with what was called the Power Pack, which was 283 engine, 4-barrel carb, dual exhaust.
Very cool.
So
you cruise that around up there?
Yeah, we took it apple picking last Sunday because it doesn't get driven nearly as much as it should, and so I'll find any excuse I can to drive it. But we also go to, there's a 50s diner called Annabelle's, where they have, a band out every Saturday night, and just tons of cars show up and sit around and talk about old cars and stuff. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing, more develop in this area.
I was
which-
kind of surprised when we moved here. I thought that with the reputation of, Texas cars and Southern cars not rusting and things like that, I thought that there would be more of a classic car community down here when we moved here in 2009. And it, it was like once a year they would do a car cruise on the square, and that was kind of the extent of what I found. So
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of stuff underneath the surface. Like there's the drag strip, over there off 35, that's been operating for who knows how long.
Yeah.
And that old junkyard next to it's, supplied a lot of people with a lot of things. But I think that culturally, that's starting to come into its own, just even in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and it's a fun culture because it pulls in a lot of different types of people. When we go out cruising, we'll see. Like I'm more of a classic car guy. I like all original cars, but then there's people who are into hot rods,
Rat
rods, and gassers, and all sorts of different cultures, all kind of mixing together and bonding over just old cars is the general headline.
It's really impressive. At a lot of these cruises, I was, to be honest, very surprised because my dad is a classic car guy, and I knew that my dad and Dave would get along at least on that level when Dave came to visit my house for the first time, because they've got like this, huge history of antique cars and classic cars that they can talk about. But there is a really large movement, seemingly, of rat rods in northeastern Ohio, or at least Ohio, maybe even Pennsylvania.
And that's a fascinating thing to me. People, I think, when they hear rat rods, immediately think of like the really over-exaggerated, some of it's really pukey, everything's welded together stuff. But, a lot of it is very much the spirit of what hot rodding started as, because those guys came back from World War II with a bunch of mechanical knowledge.
Yep.
Zero money, and really didn't want to participate because they were disillusioned, so they didn't want to go get a corporate job.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of these guys were just helping each other soup up old cars that they bought for $100 at a junkyard.
Yeah, and at that time, they had, right after World War II, like scrap drives were, during World War II, scrap drives were a big thing, and so there were just junkyards full of stuff, and they just happened to get to it before it got melted down, and just kind of would piece together whatever they could find to.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's kind of a predecessor of punk rock in a way.
Yeah.
It's just like dropping out of mainstream society and DIY.
Borrowing from whatever you can find and trying to cobble something together.
Yeah, so I like the rat rod movement, aside from the really over-the-top nonsensical stuff.
Yeah.
But even that has a value, I guess, because people are at least expressing themselves. But
Yeah.
They're not afraid. That's what I like the most, is they'll show up and they don't care what you think.
Yeah.
This is their thing. They made this.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the most exciting part, not being as much of a car person, being more of like a cultural, like just trying to get in tune with like why these things are happening. I'm just always interested in
Yeah,
that
I
kind
think
of stuff.
steampunk has influenced that to a certain extent too. Just the desire to kind of live in your own little fantasy world.
Yeah.
This world sucks. I'm going to hide within this.
I'm out.
Yeah, but I grew up with that stuff. My dad passed away in 2005 and left us with a barn full of classic cars that I hope to be able to get to someday and do something with.
It's a pretty cool inheritance.
Yeah, it's not bad, and they're I'm lucky enough to have, like, it's not just a barn full of cars, but it's like the car that my parents drove to their wedding, or it's like the car that my mom got from her. She graduated high school and her parents bought her a '69 Camaro, and we have that. Or when my dad was in high school, he drove a '65 Cutlass, and he went out and bought a Olds 442, 65 Olds 442 that was like the one he drove in high school. And so it's like this weird nostalgia and sentimental value and all this stuff just kind of like all piled on top of itself, sitting in this barn at my
Yeah, but
mom's
see,
house.
I think that's why car culture, and for people that haven't been exposed to it, I think that there's kind of this predisposition, like, oh, that's just like a macho, like jock kind of thing, and it's like it goes so far beyond that, because it's not only like what you're describing, like your family history is tied in with these cars, but then you have also the other aspect of the freedom aspect of what transportation means, and the ability to go experience new things and mix with people of a variety of cultures. And I think that's why it perpetuates with each generation, is because that part of it's awesome.
Yeah, it means so many different things to so many different people. Like when you go to car cruises, you have all of those people who have, the nostalgia and for American history or family history, and all of those people can just kind of come together.
Yeah, so it's like the United Nations of transportation.
Yeah.
Everyone can participate.
Yeah, you have like your MG clubs and
Yeah.
Chevy clubs.
I've got something cool coming up on the horizon. I can't give too much details, but it's going to involve a radio show called the Hot Rod Hour.
Okay.
And so I'll be covering like local events and spinning rockabilly records.
Oh, that should be fun.
I
Yeah.
like this already.
Yeah, it'll
You
be
don't
fun.
have to sell us on. We'll just tune in.
Cars and records? What's not to love?
Speaking of records, you're like the record guy. Like everybody knows the record guy who works in a record store. You're the record guy.
that when I was in Denton, that was me. I started collecting records when I was 15, which was half of my life ago at this point.
You mean like LP vinyl?
Yes.
LP records.
Okay.
When I was a when I was a kid, I was really into classic rock, and CDs were expensive. CDs cost $20. You could go to Half Price Books and you could buy every Led Zeppelin record for $1. So that seemed like a way better option. So that's what I started doing. And then my grandpa caught wind of it, and he had gotten this box of records from his neighbor, whose kid left it at their house. And so he goes, my grandpa was into just all sorts of like, Latin music and jazz and that kind of stuff. And he pulled this box out of his basement and he gives it to me, and he goes, I went through here and took out everything that I want, and you can have the rest. And I know there was nothing in that box that he wanted, and it was all, Pink Floyd and there was like Boston records, and there was nothing he wanted in that box. But he gave it to me. He gave me my first record player, and that was kind of the beginning of that. And it's been cool to see. I hunted for stuff for years that I'm gonna be the old guy, like the
What?
I'm gonna be the like
You're 31.
I'm gonna be like the all damn kids
Hey, that's
these
slippery
days.
slope, man.
Yeah,
You're in
but-
the 30s
You
now.
can't say.
You're an adult.
But there's like
Yeah.
stuff that I hunted for 10 years to find a good copy of Pet Sounds or something like that, and now it's just like, oh, here's you go to a record store and there's just 20 copies
Or
because they
eBay.
re-issue.
Yeah.
What you mean is you're a curmudgeon.
I'll be the curmudgeon.
Yeah, totally. It was really funny, and just kind of piecing all this together after how many years of us, being in a relationship and like working together and things like that, is you've got like, I guess, like a really good sentimental attachment to a lot of really cool old stuff that always has like a tie to a person. And I don't know, like letterpress. People always come up, my dad was a pressman, or, I used to run this in high school. This is how I learned about graphic design and things like that. People fall in love with presses. People fall in love with cars. People fall in love with these records. And
Just
it's all
a
personal.
sentimental curmudgeon,
You're
I guess.
sentimental curmudgeon. I've never known you were so soft.
Yeah, what can I say? But yeah,
They'll
that's
be getting counseling when they get back to work.
Tell me more about your life, Dave.
but yeah, so that was. I collected records for years. When Mad World Records opened on the square, I started working there and worked there pretty much the whole time that they were in Denton until we moved away. So
So I'm going to put you guys on the spot.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
sir.
what do you guys? You guys been here since 2009?
Mm-hmm.
We moved here in 2009.
Okay,
Yeah.
I first came out in 2006 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you guys feel about the direction Denton is heading? Because there's been a ton of change since that year of about 2009. What do you guys think?
Some of it is really good. When we moved here, we lived just south of the square, across from what used to be El Guapo's, which is no longer there. But we lived in those those apartments, and we would walk to the square, and there was like Jupiter House and Recycled were the only things
That had life, yeah.
that we wanted to do on the square. And so we would just like walk around, and they're on like the same side of the square, which was the same side of the street we lived on. So we would basically just walk up Locust, get a coffee, and walk back down Locust, and that was all there was to do. And that's not the case anymore. Now there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of neat stuff. I mean, I remember when Atomic opened in what used to be a tuxedo rental office. Mad World opened in what used to be like an old lady boutique store. So there's all this fun stuff that's happening, but then on the flip side of that, there's J&J is not being able to have shows in their basement anymore, and Rubber Glove's closing, and all these places that we used to go all the time that are just within a couple of months all closed down.
And a lot of it isn't, closing. It's new things opening, which is always exciting, but I feel like sometimes you have an area that is growing really quickly. Denton happens to be one of those areas, and you experience a tone deafness in what these types of businesses that are opening don't necessarily cater to the people who are living in the area. We had a burger place that opened probably 5 or 6 years ago. It's not open anymore. It's a different restaurant, same owner. That we personally felt like that was a beginning to this kind of tone deafness. They were serving like $13 hamburgers in a town where the median income is $30,000. I don't know how
generous.
you can. Yeah, it's generous. I don't know
Who's
how,
making $30,000? How do I get my hands on that?
work for them. But it just seems it seemed a little bit like the beginning of it all, and we of course don't mind eating $13 hamburgers every once in a while. It just wasn't. It wasn't quite in tune with what the community needed, and every time you are driving up and down a street in an area that's developing, look around you and count how many coffee shops are there, how many vape labs are there, how many shoe stores are there. You have to kind of start to look around you and say, how is anyone surviving where we've got multiples of these really similar businesses when one business was doing quite all right and in fact thriving, and it's kind of scary. You feel bad almost for everybody.
I don't know. I go back and forth. I have bad days and good days about it. I think that there's a lot of wonderful changes.
Yes.
The beer gardens, and the changing of the liquor laws and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
Absolutely.
great progressive stuff. I do fear like a Disneyland kind of vibe developing, but at the same time, I mean, what are you gonna do? I mean, it's taken me a lot of years to like kind of accept the inevitableness of life.
Yeah, well, it also gets into a weird thing where you don't want to have to regulate, who can open what and where, but you kind of just have to trust that everyone's gonna, everyone just be cool. And
What's a good sign to me is the issue with Subway on the square.
Yeah.
They basically got boycotted out by the public who said, we're not going to support you, and they moved.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's telling, and that's also encouraging. But, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm right on the fence between, I think that there's some really, cool Phoenix from the ashes kind of stuff that could come from things like Rubber Gloves and all of that. I mean, those people aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And they're going to regroup and figure out something else. So, I mean, I think we just got to wait and see what things turn into.
Yeah, the bigger issue is that, and one that we experienced head on was, what happens when you have the $13 burger place that's surviving in an area despite the fact that nobody in the area can afford to.
What happens to the people in the area?
Yeah.
Well, those kinds of places, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
If you look at the clientele, they're obviously people from the suburbs coming in.
Yeah, but then you have people who come in for that type of atmosphere and think like, oh, this is a great place for me to live, and move up here and displace, what used to be mostly college kids living in, dumpy little houses.
Here's
kind of thing.
the challenging part. I've talked about this issue with quite a few other creatives. Is it's like, okay, so you need a workspace, you need a living space. It has to be cheap so that you can develop your craft and your clientele and all of that. Those things at this point really only exist in small towns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't go live in a small town because you lose your brain.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, we ran into it when we were in San Francisco, where it's just, if we weren't living in the little mother-in-law apartment under my brother's house and working out of his garage, we would have, there's no way we could have done it.
Yeah.
And, you're talking to people who are paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month of rent for a one-bedroom apartment, and any little workspace. I mean, when we finally did afford a workspace, it was the back section of a friend of ours that made custom furniture, and he had a dead space full of wood, and he's like, clear that out and you can, pay me $500 to work out of there. And $500 for anything in San Francisco is like non-existent.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what you do, because I mean, you could probably go, up to, Sanger or some other little town where there's zero activity, rent something dirt cheap, but then you're completely isolated on an island.
And the other problem that you run into with that is that where we're moving our studio into is an area of Cleveland called Slavic Village. Throughout the early part of the 1900s, it was an Eastern European community of people who just had a skill and would just go set up shop and be a furniture maker or a butcher or whatever, and they would just do their thing. Then the neighborhood kind of started changing, and all of those people either died off or moved away because they didn't feel safe. And then in the early 2000s, it became ground zero for foreclosure crisis. 44105 zip code had the highest number of foreclosures of any zip code in the entire country. And so now we're at a point where everything's dirt cheap, hardly anybody wants to live there, and everyone's seeing dollar signs of well, we can buy all these buildings that are, from before World War I, and we can fix them up, and we can get people to move in here, and all of that's well and good, but it's you still have people who feel like they have to live in that community, and where do they go once you've fixed everything up? And so, we're moving in and trying, everyone's talking about, the gentrification of Slavic Village. It's coming, it's going to happen.
So in their minds, you guys are the $13 hamburger.
Yeah, exactly.
We are.
And so we're trying to strike this balance of, I like the term a gentrification, where we're not coming in and trying to drive up everybody's home values and doing all this stuff, but just kind of make everybody in the neighborhood feel comfortable about being in the neighborhood, and trying to bring everybody up, which I know is the thing that everybody says before an area gets gentrified, but
we sound like hippies.
Yeah, well,
it's really, I think, essential to understand that not everything can be perfectly organic, but if you pay a lot of attention to what the area needs, what it can sustain, and where the breaking point is, you can fit in just fine, not ruin anyone's day, not take away from anyone, and improve your community. And that is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So
and that's cool. And I also think that there's there's like a symbiotic relationship between the capitalists and the artists, because you can't really facilitate a lot of those changes without somebody who's willing to, be speculative and put money on the line and all of that. So
and work out of an area of town that nobody wants to work out of, because they're.
See, what you guys are facing is kind of like this small town scenario, but it's within a larger metropolitan area that you can tap into.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's maybe different about, the Metroplex is very much like the LA sprawl.
Mm-hmm.
Just rolls into one thing into another, and all of them have their, massive housing developments creeping in and all this stuff. And, there's really no way to be in the Metroplex that I've identified to where you can also do what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to be you're in the heart of an old city like that's got little pockets.
Yeah, and I mean, Cleveland has a ton of them. There's really good pockets where everybody wants to live, and then there's the parts that everybody hears about on the news and makes everybody afraid to come to Cleveland. But those aren't. I mean, I don't think that either one of those places is a good representation of the city as a whole. There's, but that's anywhere.
Yeah, without that,
my co-host Tom in Limerick, Ireland,
Mm-hmm.
we've talked quite a bit. Limerick is kind of the Cleveland of Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like it.
It's got a long history, but it's kind of always been like the redheaded stepchild of Dublin and all this kind of stuff. And they're just now, with a lot of effort, kind of overcoming that, but it's still kind of like, oh, but that's Limerick. That's what I've picked up from him anyway.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how things like that, take in people's minds and reputations.
And the sad thing is that, in the 1920s, Cleveland had the highest per capita income of like any city in the U.S. because it was situated exactly between New York and Chicago. So if you were an industrialist who wanted to work in New York and Chicago, you could live in Cleveland and be equidistant from both of your, manufacturing or whatever you were doing in those two cities. So they actually had Euclid Avenue in Cleveland. It's called Millionaires Row. And, the Rockefellers had houses there, and the Carnegies had houses there, and there's all this.
So all of our problems stem from Cleveland.
Well, it stems from people. It stems from people leaving Cleveland. That's the problem, because once air travel became a thing and everyone was flying everywhere, and you didn't need to be located centrally to your businesses, and you could go wherever, people were like, well, why do we want to live in Cleveland? Let's leave. So then that's where all the problems started. Is when everybody left, and they only came back to get buried.
Good save.
Yeah.
got awesome graveyards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a blast digging around up there, and my parents came from Cleveland originally. Before we moved to Texas, I was like 7 or 8. So it was kind of interesting going. I did live there for a couple of years in my early 20s, because my dad wanted to move the business back there, and after like 2 winters was like,
it's hard.
Yeah.
Going back to Texas.
It's not for everybody.
It's definitely chilly, and it's like, you see why people who were of lower income lived there. It was, you summer in Cleveland, you have a lake, and then you leave. But you live there year round because you don't have enough money to get away from the snowstorm.
Having grown up in South Texas, when we went back for a few years, it was a shock to the system. It was like, I cannot believe how cold this is.
Yes. We went back a couple of Christmases ago when we were still living in Texas, and we had to drive to a show that we were doing, and we had to get there at like 7 in the morning, which in winter is still dark out, and it was an awful snowstorm, and there was thunder snow. So it's a thunder and lightning storm with a downpour of snow, and the roads were horrible, and I couldn't see anything, and I'm white knuckle driving down the freeway, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what it was, but something just clicked in my head, and it was like, oh, I'm from here, I know how to do this. And then after that, I was fine and just kind of soldiered on, and we made it there.
So you guys came from Cleveland to Denton so that you could go to school.
Yes, so
Okay.
I took him with me, and I actually asked him to come with me as a joke, which is really funny because you can hear how much he loves Cleveland, and he came to Texas with me, so he must have really liked me for a little while at least. But yeah, we're both from Cleveland. We're just from opposite sides of Cleveland. I feel like.
Which our Uber driver explained to us is a thing.
They're-
Like if you're from one side,
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're not
it's-
from the other side.
We're like Hatfields and McCoys. We had to meet
We're-
at the river on our first date and just like kind of strike an accord to make our families
Very
okay
Romeo
with
and
it.
Juliet.
I was going to say, I think
Basically,
we're
yeah.
more Romeo and Juliet because there's the love factor. The Hatfields
See,
and
now
McCoys
I'm
killed
got
each
the good
other.
side.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's Hatfields and McCoys,
Yeah, sometimes we want to kill each other.
but it happens.
Okay, so in the last 7 days, well, you've been on a trip,
Yeah.
so you can go back a little further.
Okay.
But you can name off what you want, but you have to include some guilty pleasures. Like, what have you guys listened to in the last 2 weeks? Complete honesty.
So
She's laughing like she's feeling guilty about something.
No, he's the one who should be guilty.
we were driving to the airport, and I don't know what it is about Cleveland, but for being the rock and roll capital of the world, the radio stations are not that good. And so we were driving down the freeway, and I don't even remember what station it was. We were listening to something, and I just blanked on the song. I can't even remember what song
Oh,
it was.
come on.
You know he knows.
No, I can't remember what song it was. I've just had horrible songs stuck in my head.
Just
for,
sing
like,
a few bars.
God, you should. You got
I don't
the
remember.
talent. It was something along the lines of a boy band song that came out of
It wasn't a boy band song. It wasn't a boy band
Yeah, I'm
song.
thinking
It
it
was
might have
been.
no. It was "Next to Be with You" by Mr. Big.
He knew
Came
all
on in the radio,
the words. All the words.
and well, because that's what my dad listened to. Like that was
Blame it on your dad.
that's what he listened to. So
Your dad left you cars. And
Yeah,
you blame it on
you
your
were.
dad.
he also
Nice.
left me a heavily 80s influenced music collection. And so but apparently like Laura had never even heard that song, which was weird to me because it was a super popular song. But then that song has just been stuck in my head all day, so I'm having to listen to like all of this just like basically punk music to get it out.
You've got. Okay.
I have to exercise the demons.
So when Kaylee and I were in you guys' car,
Mm-hmm.
when we went to go get food and stuff, you guys were playing some stuff for us
Oh,
that
yeah.
was really cool. What was that?
We were playing
A giant dog.
Giant Dog, their new album called Pile. They have 3 albums: A Giant Dog Pile, and then their second album is A Giant Dog's
Bone.
and their first album is A Giant Dog's Fight. So those are their
Yeah.
3 albums, and I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep that up, but it's been fun.
A Giant Dog is by far the best music to listen to when you are driving home from a show really late at night and you're on the edge of slipping into like sleepy drivey land, and you'll die.
This is like modern punk, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
like, what would you classify that as a genre?
It's
Power pop?
Yeah, it's like heavy power pop, like early 70s power pop. When we saw them in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, they played a song by a band called Sparks, which
It's good.
Sparks is like one of the weirdest bands because they released a ton of albums and half of them are really good, but they don't have like a early period that's good and a later period that's bad. It's just like whatever they were feeling at the time, and so they have. You can just go on allmusic.com and look up Sparks and just
How do you?
there's a bunch of 5-star album reviews and
Yeah.
they're really good.
They're great. The best part about it is like you're gonna listen to this, and if you like it, you immediately have a friend when you say like, so do you like to listen to Sparks? If they say, ugh, no, like screw them.
Yeah.
Don't hang out with them.
Usually what happens is you say, have you ever listened to Sparks? And the answer is either yes or what the hell are you talking about? I've never heard of that
And
band
you
in
be
my
friends
life.
with the person who's heard of Sparks before, and if the person
Well,
has
get
heard
out of my studio, 'cause I don't know what you're talking
you
about.
gotta listen to Sparks.
You can listen to them. They're very silly.
It's awesome, like alone in the studio, trying to like just like be entertained while you're painting or drawing or running the press. We like stuff with like a good beat because the press is a really rhythmic kind of thing, and you get tired out real fast. It's we call them print push-ups on our tiny little press because it's just really
that's
going
manual
at
labor.
it. Manual labor. So you need some stimulation from caffeine, good music. Who else have we been listening to? Car Seat Headrest.
Car Seat Headrest has a new album that's pretty good.
They talk about the thing with the cars.
They did a song on their new album that was very heavily influenced by the Cars' Just What I Needed.
Okay.
And when I say heavily influenced, I mean they directly borrowed parts of that song and made this new song around it. And the band called Rick Ocasek from the Cars, said, hey, we wrote this song, we want to put it on our next album, but we want your okay to do it. And he listened to the song and said, yeah, I guess it's fine, whatever. So they went forward, like mastered the album, pressed it, got everything printed for the album cover and everything, and like right before the album came out, they got a phone call from his lawyers and they said, you can't put that song on your album. And they had to destroy every copy of this album
And the
that had
lesson
existed.
is,
Don't
don't ask for
permission, just
for
do
forgiveness.
it. So they had to repress this record without one song on it because, Rick Ocasek wasn't happy or his lawyers weren't happy or whatever. But the rest of the album is good. That song that they took off the album was, I don't know if it's my favorite song on the album because of what happened or if it was my favorite song anyways, but I really...
Controversy sells.
Yeah, I really like that song, and I was kind of upset that it didn't make the album, but...
We're kind of into a little bit of like the surf comeback of the West Coast bands. A lot of them kind of like are touring a lot now, so you can probably find a couple of really good ones. But the other band that we like to listen to that has a good number of instrumental songs, if you're not down with vocals, is La Luz. It's a really great, I think they're from Portland. They are new wave surf, I guess. I don't know. It's really fun. If you like vocals, they got vocals. If you don't like vocals, they don't have vocals.
Yeah, they have two albums. They're both really good.
Their music videos are fun too because they really touch on a visual culture of like old pulp posters, and they love to do like the 60s soundstage aesthetic, but like something is kind of messed up about it. Like the platforms they're standing on are not quite level and stuff like that. Really plays with your mind. So also
just a lesson. I don't know the lesson that we learned, but a lesson for visual artists out there. Their first album cover is it's a picture of a painting that somebody had done, and they, put their graphics on it and everything. And Laura picked up this record the first time, and she looks at it, and she goes, the person who made this album cover has a cat. And I go, how do you know that? That's like a weird thing to think of when you pick up this album cover. And in the photo, you can see like little cat hairs on the painting, like they didn't. So if you're a visual artist and you want to photograph your work, make sure you do it in a cat-free space, or people like Laura are going to automatically know that you have a cat and judge you.
I think that's more an issue of Laura's than it is who's making the art.
Yeah, probably. But
what does that tell you about me? They go a little bit more than I wanted people to know.
It tells me that you have a cat, because how else would you know what cat hair looks like on a painting?
Yeah. Tells me.
So, are you guys familiar with Arhoolie Records?
Yes.
Okay. So, I've got an arrangement with them. At the end of every podcast, I play a song from their catalog. So, what genre of music would you like attached with your interview?
Oh.
It can be old blues, it can be Tejano, it can be Zydeco.
Can we get some like good soul? Like, do they have soul?
Not really. They don't really.
Because he documented everything going on in pretty much the southern U.S.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would like a very soulful blues song.
Okay, Hep Cats. This is the part of the show where we play a song from the Arhoolie archive, so pay attention. You can get these tunes from the legendary Arhoolie Records at arhoolie.com. Now sit back, open up some One Shot, crank up the volume, and expand your minds, babies.
morning and I found my baby gone. Woke up early in the morning, and I found my baby gone. You know, I ain't got no feeling now, and I just might as well give up my happy home. I wanna love you, baby, take you by my side. I want everyone to know, baby, that you wanna be the love I can't hide. Please come on back home. I know you by my side, baby. I want you to be my loving man. I want to tell everyone that I meet that you really understand. Oh, baby. Please stick by me. Yes, and I can't help myself, pretty baby. Your love is where it ought to be.
Thanks for listening, folks. Tune in next episode for more madness from Sean and Tom. This episode was brought to you by Full City Rooster Coffee Roasters, makers of the Sign Painters Blend, the coffee Sean and Tom drink in their studios every day. Also brought to you by RebelRouserHotRods.com. Licensed apparel by Sean Starr, including support your local sign painter gear.